This video is sponsored by BetterHelp, except it's not, cause it's a fucking scam. So a few days ago I got this comment. Don't know if you'll see this, but I have a question. If I want to upgrade my beginner drum set to get a better sound, what would be the first things to replace? I'm on a budget and can't replace everything at once, so what would you say I should upgrade first? I have a Pearl export kit with a matching snare and Pearl brass cymbals. That's a very good question. When it comes to upgrading your drum set, people are gonna have a lot of very different ideas of what is most important, and obviously it depends a lot on what style you play, what kind of music you play, and also it depends a lot on the gear that you already have. Now, in your particular situation, the Pearl Export series are actually pretty good drums with a decent sounding snare drum, pretty good hardware and kinda cheap sounding cymbals. At least that has been the case with all the Pearl Export series that I have played. Now, before you go out and buy a whole bunch of new expensive stuff, remember that you can often get some really good deals by buying things used. Pretty much all of my snare drums and cymbals that I use in all of my videos are bought second hand, and it has literally saved me thousands of dollars throughout the years. So if you're patient and you know where to look for used gear, you can get some pretty good deals every now and again. Another thing is that if you, let's say you buy a used snare drum for maybe $100 or $200, chances are that in a few years you'll be able to sell it for pretty much the same price. Generally, drums hold their value very well. I mean, it's not like when you buy a car and as soon as you get it, the value just plummets like Kevin Spacey's career. Now, most people will probably say that the first thing you should go for should be a high quality set of cymbals, since this is where you'll most drastically improve your sound. And this is true, a fresh set of cymbals can make a whole world of difference. But when it comes to value for money, there's one thing on the drum set that I would personally replace before anything else, and that is the resonant head on your snare drum. And why the resonant head, you might ask? Personally, I find that when it comes to snare drums, the tuning and the quality of your resonant head actually has an even greater effect on the overall sound of the drum than the better head. And the reason for this, I think, is mainly that the resonant head is the head that primarily works with the snare wires. Getting a good set of snare wires is also a huge and often very overlooked upgrade, but generally Pearl makes pretty good snare wires, so you should be in the clear at least for a while. However, Snare Reso-heads on cheaper drums are generally a bit thicker than high quality Reso-heads from, for example, Remo or Evans. And I'm not sure if this is the case with Pearl Export series, but getting a high quality drum head that is specifically designed as a Reso head like the Remo Ambassador Hazy head, not the regular Remo Ambassador head, will improve your sound significantly. Next on the list, I've decided to put the cymbals. Another obvious choice might be batter heads for your entire drum kit. But personally I find that with a little bit of muffling and a lot of tuning, you can make even a bad drum head on a alright drum sound not necessarily good, but you can certainly do something about the sound to improve it, which is not really the case with cymbals. I mean, you can put things on cymbals to muffle them a bit, you can drill holes in them to make them sound more trashy, but you can't tune a cymbal the same way you can tune a drum. Which cymbals you replace first should obviously depend on your playing style and your personal preferences, but if I were to upgrade a beginner drum set, I would begin with the hi-hats, since getting a fresh set of high quality hats really just changes your entire overall sound as a drummer. And after that I would replace the crash cymbal and then the ride. A lot of people might prioritize differently, and that's completely fine, but this is how I would do it. When it comes to choosing the right cymbals, it's really just all about checking out as many different brands and series that you can come close to. Also, it's very important to remember that just because something is expensive doesn't mean that it sounds good, and vice versa. For example, a lot of people really like the very thick and super expensive Peisty Root series, but I don't like them. They're just not for me. But vice versa, there is the medium-priced Sabian XS20 cymbals, which I kinda like, but a lot of people don't like. So really it's just about checking out what's on the market and deciding for yourself what you think sounds the best. The third upgrade I would make would be the rest of the drum heads. If you're on a very limited budget and you can't possibly fit both the batter and resonant heads into your budget, I would say start with replacing the batter heads. A lot of people will probably tell you that the resonance heads actually have a greater effect on the overall sound of the drum, but once again, this is one of those personal preferences things. Some people say one thing, other people say another. I'm on board with the batter heads. Personally, I think that having a good set of batter heads has a slightly greater effect on the tom's sound than having a good set of resonant heads and shitty batter heads. But it depends a lot on how you tune the drums and how you play them. Something that's very important to remember is that you need to learn how to tune drums, and you also need to practice tuning drums, kinda in the same vein that you would practice actually playing the drums, because you don't just watch a YouTube video and you're like, oh, I know how to tune drums now. It's something that you really have to practice, and you have to get to know your drum set, because every set of drums reacts to different heads and different tunings in different rooms in different ways. So basically there are just so many layers to drum tuning that it's not something you just quickly learn in an afternoon. Alright, for upgrade number 4 I've chosen 2 items that I find are equally important, and that is the bass drum pedal and the drum stool, or throne, or whatever. I'm gonna call the butt rest for the rest of this video. Anyway, the butt rest is the most underrated part of the drum set, and getting a high quality sturdy butt rest with adjustable height and a comfortable seat is just a massive and often very overlooked improvement. Something I noticed when I bought a proper butt rest was that fast double bass drumming actually became a lot easier, because I was sitting more comfortably and I could raise the seat up higher, so I had a better chance of making gravity work to my advantage. Plus, I could play for a longer period of time because I improved my posture. As for the bass pedal, this is just kind of a no-brainer, especially if you play music that requires a lot of speed and precision, like pretty much all metal. And Pearl's cheaper kits generally have decent pedals, but this is definitely not the case for all beginner drum sets. And just like with cymbals and drum heads, snare drums and pretty much everything else, people have very different preferences when it comes to bass drum pedals. Some people really like the very light and super fast access pedals. Some people are more into the heavier DW5000 series. Personally, I use the Speed Cobras from Tama, which I personally find is a pretty good middle ground between the power from the DW pedals and the speed from the Access pedals. And back to the snare drum. Pearl export kits generally come with really good snare drums actually, and that is the only reason why the snare is so far down this list. If your kit has a very bad snare that you can't possibly make sound good, no matter how good heads you put on and you change the snare wires and you spend hours and hours tuning it, if you still can't get it to sound good, the snare drum would be a lot higher on this list, probably as a number 3 pick, like between the cymbals and the batter heads for the entire kit. Generally, I find that you can get a pretty good sound out of most medium-priced series from bigger brands, such as the Pearl Export series, the Yamaha Stage Custom or Tama Metalworks snare drums. In fact, the black snare drum that I play in many of my drum covers is actually a Tama Metalworks that I got for $100 used. So it just goes to show that you don't have to drop a lot of money to get something that you can get to sound really good. Next on the list is the hardware, particularly your hi-hat stand and the snare stand. And a good rule of thumb is that if you ever think about hardware while you're playing, you have a hardware problem. At least that's how I see it. Because hardware should just be there and you shouldn't have to think about it at all. You should have sturdy stands that can keep your cymbals, that won't fall over if you hit them. Your hi-hat stand should be fast and reactive, and it shouldn't suddenly drop the top hat. That can even happen on very expensive stands, so getting something really sturdy and reliable is just so important. And the only real reason why they're so far down the list is that, well, things like drum heads, snare drums and cymbals are just more important. But obviously that doesn't mean that having good hardware is completely insignificant. And lastly, there is the rest of the drum set, a shell set, a toms and bass drum. And some people might put this higher on the list, and that's completely understandable, because having a nice drum set is obviously gonna make it a lot easier to get a good and fantastic sound. And something like a Yamaha Recording Custom or my DW kit just has the potential to sound great. The reason I put this last on the list is that I find you can get a medium-priced drum set like the Pearl Export series You can get that to sound great with some good drum heads, and if you spend a lot of time tuning it correctly and you know what you're doing, obviously. High-end drum sets obviously has the potential to sound much better than most medium-priced drum sets, but taking into consideration how expensive some drum sets can be, there are a lot of other things that I would prioritize higher. So anyway, those are my immediate thoughts on how I would go about upgrading a beginner drum set. Obviously different people are gonna have different priorities and different ideas, and there's really no right or wrong when it comes to personal preferences. But this is how I would do it, and if you have any other ideas to things you could do to improve your drum set, leave a comment. I'm sure a lot of people will be very eager to hear it. Anyway, that's it for now, so toodles!